Hello, and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben, and with me is...
Lord Sidious.
It's not a bad Lord Sidious, and we're doing it, guys. We're doing it. We're finishing a trilogy of films. It's the first time in the history of podcasting, maybe just our podcast, that we've ever done it. And we are watching Star Wars, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
No.
Oh, there's some good lines in this one. But look, before we get too deep into it, this was my pick, so that means I have the privilege, if you will, of delivering a succinct synopsis of the film, which I'm sure anyone knows this film, but I'm going to do my duty to our galaxy and give you this synopsis. You ready for this?
I'm ready for it.
Revenge of the Sith opens with Jedi Knights Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi leading a daring mission to rescue Chancellor Palpatine from General Grievous. Upon their triumphant return, Anakin is tormented by prophetic dreams of his wife Padme's death and gradually drawn towards the dark side by Palpatine, who reveals himself as the Sith Lord Darth Sidious and promises to hold the power to stop Padme from dying. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan travels to the Utapau system to confront and defeat General Grievous. Back on Coruscant, Anakin turns on the Jedi, helps Sidious execute the devastating Order 66, and becomes Darth Vader. Obi-Wan returns to confront his fallen friend in a fiery duel on Mustafar while Padme gives birth to Luke and Leia, hidden away as the hope for the future. And somewhere in there, some younglings die.
Do they ever? And look, it'll come back to haunt us in many Star Wars spin-offs in the future.
You bet it will. Give me some facts, though. I gave you the fiction of what happens in the film. Give us some facts on what happened on the production.
Released in 2005, directed by George Lucas of THX 1138 and American Graffiti fame. Written by, spoilers again, George Lucas. Starring Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman, Hayden Christensen, Ian McDermott, Samuel L. Jackson, Christopher Lee, Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker, and Frank Oz. Music by a friend of the podcast, John Williams. Runtime of 140 minutes. Budget of $113 million. As per Box Office Mojo statistics, box office, US domestic, $380 million, international, $469 million, with a total worldwide release of $849,997,605.
And there it was. That was Revenge of the Sith. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a good one.
Same joke. What did you think, Ben? It had been a while for me since Revenge of the Sith. So I've seen it many times since cinemas, but it just been, maybe 12 months since I watched this one.
Look, it's a favorite of mine. I still think Phantom Menace is my favorite of the prequels, and that is a nostalgia call for me. Just again, as I said in that episode, I was the perfect age. I was just ready for that movie. But this movie is, I think, the movie a lot of Star Wars fans think of even indirectly when they think of the prequels. It has probably the most Jedi-based action in a movie. It has one of the most memorable villains in a movie for the short time he spends on screen in General Grievous. And it has the reveal of the master plan. The thing that the machinations in the background have been building towards, the Emperor taking over the Republic, creating the Empire, and kind of executing Order 66. It answers questions that we had. How do the Jedi disappear? How does Anakin end up as Vader? How does Obi-Wan end up on Tatooine and Yoda end up on Dagobah? How do the twins end up separated? It gives us a satisfying conclusion to what is a kind of, or ends up being the first third of a story, but was at this point the midpoint of a story. I think it was really, really well executed. There was a lot of balls that could have been dropped in the making of this movie, and I don't really think they were. You can argue I wish things were done better or tweaked better, but the major notes were hit, and I think they were hit well.
Yeah, I would generally agree. I'm probably not quite as glowing as you on the film overall, but I would agree on many of those larger points. Like the action in particular in this movie is definitely the peak of the prequel era and arguably the peak of all Star Wars when we look at it. Like simply, the Yoda v Sidious fight. We have Anakin versus Obi-Wan, which is absolutely spectacular. And then there's the whole opening 25 minutes where they rescue Palpatine, which has just some awesome Star Wars action. The opening shot of this movie is breathtaking in its scope and audacity, and it's this huge one-er as they go through this battle in the atmosphere above Coruscant, and it just looks beautiful. So there's a lot here visually and in terms of spectacular wow factor stuff that isn't really seen anywhere else to this scale in the rest of the Star Wars saga. So I definitely appreciate it for that. And then, as you say, it's got a lot of the stuff we'd been waiting a very long time for. It's all kind of crammed into this movie, which is Anakin's turn. We get Vader in the suit. We get, you know, the confrontation between Anakin and Obi-Wan, all the stuff you said, right? We get all that stuff. So I do quite like Revenge of the Sith overall, but I would agree with you as well that my favorite of the prequel era is still The Phantom Menace, you know, which I think people who are true prequel people, that's going to really annoy them because they are really ride or die for this movie. And I can see why. But at the same time, I do think that some of the problems that we were dealing with in Attack of the Clones transfer to this movie. They're just not quite as egregious this time around, and the plot isn't all about, say, Anakin and Padme, so therefore we don't have as much of it. But the dialogue is just the same between those two and what they have to deliver and what they're expected to actually perform with that. So, you know, and that's not the only thing as well that I think transfers over and is a bit murky with the film. This is the film where we see Darth Vader turn to the dark side, and we should talk about that transformation. How do you think? We've been waiting for this for such a long time, and what's the execution of that like for you?
I think the Vader transformation, as of all the answers that we get in this film, is probably the most underwhelming. I'm not going to say disappointing, but like we have this epic fight on Mustafar, but the kind of turn to the dark side, like even before he's full suit Vader, the turn to the dark side is a bit, it feels quick and it feels unearned. This movie is a weird thing in that it strangely gets, I think, better once you've watched the Clone Wars TV series.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does.
But like filling in the gap between those two movies with what is effectively the war, because this is the end of the war, right? It actually gives you more of the slow turn, the slow descent into arrogance and the dark side of Anakin Skywalker. But you get that in a quick form in this film. And then you get the battle in Mustafar where you get Obi-Wan defeating his friend, his brother, his Padawan, and leaving him to kind of burn. And then you get the transformation into Vader. The transformation into Vader feels weak. It gets redeemed in Rogue One, and you kind of get that kind of what you wanted to kind of see in this movie of someone who inspires fear, but that's not in this movie. So
yeah, it's the speed at which he turns into Vader. Now, I'm not really talking about the Mustafar suit stuff. No. I actually quite like all that stuff. It's more before that when he has the decision to turn on the Jedi. For me, that is just so fast and it remains jarring in the movie. Now, it is motivated. You can't deny that
reason.
No, that's right. Like, it's in terms of the motivation for the character, it's there. And it's actually not a bad motivation either. It's a good motivation because we have established, if nothing else, Anakin loves Padme. We get that. If you watch the prequels and get nothing else, you will understand that Anakin loves Padme. So the idea that someone or something is threatening her, I can absolutely buy that he would throw away the farm if there was a chance to save her. The thing that gets it for me is just how fast he says, I have no other option but to do all of these monstrous things and turn to the dark side. Because as portrayed in the film, and I've seen the Clone Wars as well, and I agree with you that it gives a lot of additional and possibly retconned context.
Yes.
To the whole affair, like as presented in the film, that is the only motivation he has for turning to the dark side, which you think, wow, for the extent that he goes to the dark side, like, it's surprising and doesn't quite work in terms of scale, because he literally pledges himself to Palpatine, and in the very next scene, he is straight up murdering children. Like, it's that fast. It goes from one to the other. And
Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What
I
are
know,
we going
and
to do?
that is such a rough scene. That is such a rough scene. That has
Yeah.
got to be one of the roughest scenes and stuff. Like, not from an execution point of view.
No.
Because it's executed so well, it's hard to watch. It's very difficult. And there's a lot of moments of greatness like that in this movie. But like I said, I find the speed of that turn difficult. And every time I watch Revenge of the Sith, I always walk away thinking the exact same thing, which is that would have been better as 2 movies.
Because the descent to Vader effectively happens across 2 movies, right? And it happens across like a few major pivots. The first is the death of his mother, Shmi, and the slaughtering of the Tuscans, right? You see what he is capable of, and he learns what he is capable of in the face of losing a loved one. Then you get to kind of episode 3, and you get the visions, and you learn, if you read the extended material or you watch other things, those visions are actually given to him by Palpatine. But you don't get that in the movie, so you can't use that, right, as a justification. You kind of can guess, maybe. But yeah, so he has visions, and those visions are of loss and losing Padme and those sort of things, right? And then you get kind of the talk in the opera of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. And then you get the confession, and then you get the turn. And it's not a lot. It's really not a lot. I may have missed a step there or a nuance there if you want to be picky, but they're the big uns, right? They're the moments that you kind of get. And you're right, it doesn't feel as earned inside the world that is just the movies.
And I think as well, you can understand the story dilemma that they were in at this point in the trilogy, because they just didn't have the screen real estate in one movie to do it in many different ways. Really, you needed a few quick scenes because they'd obviously committed to this movie being quite action heavy. And I also look at that and go, that's the right instinct. That's what Star Wars fans in particular needed at this point in the prequel trilogy. So therefore, crazily, the most important narrative turn and character turn of the Star Wars saga is actually kind of shortchanged when you look at all of that. So, and I know that there are, as I say, prequel people who say you're wrong and that's not true and whatever, but that is what I see when I look at the film. So how much of a problem is that for the film? It's not really. Like I said, it's still motivated.
Enjoyable.
It still works. It's still enjoyable. It's just more something that you walk away going, I would have liked a little more time for that somehow.
I was thinking about this while watching this film, and then thinking back on the other 2 we've just watched. I think this could be a little bit solved by one small story change. In episode 1, make him about 2 years older.
We talked about that in episode 1.
Did we? Yeah, and then make Padme a bit 2 years older, because then you kind of get a moment. You could have a slightly older Anakin who makes a slightly dark decision in episode 1. You could see the hints of it, maybe the conflict more, and then you could get more in episode 2. And then you're right, it doesn't matter in episode 3 how old he is. He's a full-fledged Jedi at that point. But yeah, if he was just 2 years older, it would just give enough, and it wouldn't break canon in any way, and all that sort of stuff. I want to talk about Palpatine. So I've spoken about Palpatine in the previous 2 movies about how I think this is really his trilogy. And this is absolutely his movie of the trilogy. And you get this you get the birth of the Emperor. You get the reveal. You get the butterfly out of the cocoon, if you will.
Yeah, the evil Force lightning butterfly out of the cocoon.
Butterfly out of a cocoon of Force hatred. But there are moments where he is silly in this movie. And it's a combination of, to show character moments during a fight that he's not actually fighting in, having to come real close to that face, and kind of just like, he was almost vaudevillian in his evil, in his dialogue, in his kind of portrayal. And it's very deliberate, and I think it's very, very fun. But it doesn't give you the fear of the Emperor that you get in Return of the Jedi when you've barely even seen him at that point. So, but yeah, I think he's great. Ian McDermott, as we said, is fantastic, or McDermott, and he's fantastic. But yeah, this is the Emperor's movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that pivotal scene is a scene where there are some big choices being made.
Bold.
And yeah, bold, particularly with the Force lightning there, as he's got the Force lightning on Mace Windu, and then they're back and forth. And I mean, I even alluded to it in the opening of our podcast. That's the infamous no, you will die. It's something. And I do think it's a little too big, much as I love the memification of it that we've gotten over the years, because that moment really gives you that. But I also do think that much as his character rather has one of the best fights in the Star Wars saga, which is Sidious versus Yoda, I do think that Sidious versus Mace Windu in Palpatine's apartments is actually one of the weakest fights that we have in the entire Star Wars canon as well, which I know is a big call because we're now bringing in the sequel trilogy as well. But that is just that fight is not a good fight. I don't know what other way to say it. I do know why it's not a good fight. So the audio commentary, they actually talk about that fight and that Lucas changed his mind functionally on what that fight was going to be. And it was originally going to be a fight that was shot a lot wider and used more stunt doubles and had more intricate and, I suppose, acrobatic choreography, because it was going to rely more on the doubles. And then he reconceived it very close to shooting, where they decided to go in close and get a lot of be right in there with them. But of course, they were still using the CG face replacements as well, which you alluded to as being a problem. And it was really that last minute recontextualization of that fight that I think left it somewhat lacking in the final version.
I've mentioned it on the podcast, so I'm a wrestling fan, right? And there's a common thing in wrestling where you've got a show, right? You've got to fit all these fights in the show, and sometimes a fight goes long, which means another fight gets to suffer. It has to go short, and that's kind of what this feels like in this film. You've just explained that wasn't the reason. There was a deliberate choice, a creative moment, but it feels like we've got to have this fight. We don't have enough time in the movie to have a fight. Let's just cut it down. Because what it ends up being is a display of power and manipulation rather than a fight, right? Like, because Palpatine dispatches the Jedi, other than Mace Windu, with what is comical ease. And then you get Mace. I don't think he actually is getting the better of Palpatine. Palpatine's playing that moment. But you get Mace dominating, and you get kind of Palpatine using it as the final moment to turn Anakin. Like, look, they're betraying me. I told you I'm the only one who can help you. You know, they're going to kill me, and all you want them to do is keep me alive so I can help you. They're evil. And then you get the moment of Mace going out the window and the final kind of submission of Anakin and the turning of Vader.
It is also tricky because and I'll talk about this in a second actually, but Mace Windu, or Samuel L. Jackson in this movie, he has been portrayed in the films as nothing other than kind of an ultimate Jedi. He's an ultimate Jedi master. He's wise. He understands the Force. He does everything right. So for him to just be like, I'm going to kill this guy because he is not good news, you can actually understand Anakin saying, what are you talking about? That is not what I expect from you. And again, the retcon army comes to the rescue when you look at Mace Windu, and there's a lot of material in the expanded universe that I can't even honestly remember these days if it's Legends or if it's canon or what it is, but where they talk about he's got this Shatterpoint ability and he has sort of, always teetering just on the edge of the dark side a little bit because that's his ability. But none of that's in the film. And in the film that we're watching, we see a very bizarre kind of turn that helps to motivate Anakin, but it also leaves you going, what? This is supposed to be, the Yoda of the Jedi Council, who isn't Yoda, but you know what I'm saying.
even if you take in what it is definitely canon material in the Clone Wars, right? The Clone Wars really deals with this, the loss of power of the Jedi. And the movies mention this, right? They say, like, we can't let people know we're not as strong as we used to be. We can't let people know we're blind. The TV shows deals a lot with that, and you can kind of use that to justify Mace's desperation. He wants to free the Jedi from their blindness. This is the obstacle, right? But again, the movie doesn't allow you to have that justification without the external or the extra kind of context. I want to talk about something that I didn't realize happened in these movies. And it happens in every Star Wars movie. I'm going to say this, but it feels more obvious in this movie. The use of one-off characters in a film in Star Wars. So in this film, we get General Grievous. He is this big bad. We don't get build up to him being this big bad. We don't get the build up. We know this. We're fans. We don't get the build up of him knowing he has killed multiple Jedi before. We get a glimpse when he has other lightsabers on him and all that sort of stuff, but we don't get that. But we get this. We're told to feel a certain way about him without seeing him at his strongest and his best. And this, again, happens in this movie multiple times. Jango Fett in episode 2, to a lesser extent, not as a bad or powerful person, but Jar Jar Binks in episode 1. There are these big pivotal characters in these 3 films that are one-off and either abandoned or killed off or made in such a way that they cannot continue their story in the films. And that, it feels more jarring in the prequels than it does almost any other film in the Star Wars universe. And I don't know if it's something you've thought about before, but it's something that really stuck out to me with Grievous in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something as well where you can chart it, and I think it happens for different reasons. It's because obviously, as much as Lucas says at certain points anyway, that it's all one continuous story that he's always had in his head, he's obviously also clearly patching story problems as they arise with these characters who are sort of one and done. And I do feel like if he had, say, all 3 scripts, he might have had the major overall beats kind of rattling around in there, but he definitely didn't have all 3 scripts in advance ready to go. So he wasn't able to sort of construct it necessarily as tightly as 3 films as part of a whole. It's interesting, though, that you talk about things appearing in a film and then disappearing, because the one that really stands out to me is you can chart the slapstick humor transferring from character to character in all of the prequels in a way that is just fascinating, which is that obviously episode 1, it's all with Jar Jar Binks. And that is not received well. We talked about that on our episode 1 podcast, even though you and I both thought it was fine. But the world, if you like, didn't react well to the slapstick stylings of Jar Jar Binks. So they got rid of Jar Jar Binks or minimized his character substantially for episode 2. And you think, okay, well, that's it. We're done with that. But we weren't. They just transferred the slapstick stuff from Jar Jar to C-3PO in episode 2. And all through the droid factory, and he's getting his head swapped off and he's stumbling around and he's hanging on to stuff. It's a nightmare. It's all the same stuff. It's the Jar Jar stuff. It's just with a different, digital skin on it because it's 3PO now doing all of this stuff. And then that didn't go over super well in episode 2 either. So guess who gets minimized in episode 3? I think 3PO says about 6 words in episode 3. And all of that slapstick, again, it's actually still present. It just gets transferred to R2 in the first 25 minutes of the film. And finally, we have a pairing of this comedy style with a character, in this case, the astromech droid, that the fan base is willing to accept. So it's just kind of crazy to me that he really obviously wanted the slapstick humor. He was like, I must have it for some reason. So
because R2 had achieved that in other films already. He does that in the original trilogy. The little kind of camera pop-ups or the little kind of squeals and boops and explosions, those are happened. It was proven. It's wild that it took to this episode to kind of think, oh no, this is actually the way to do this.
It's dialed up to like 11
Yes,
though in
he's
this
a
movie.
clown in
He's
this, yeah.
crashing into walls and, popping out of spare parts of droids and putting oil slicks on the ground and lighting them on fire. Like, it's all over the shop. So, and again, in a way that I don't particularly mind. I think the version that I liked the least was probably the 3PO slapstick in
Yeah.
episode 2. I didn't really mind the Jar Jar. I don't mind the R2, but it was the 3PO one in the middle that kind of got me.
Well,
And I love 3PO.
strangely enough, 3PO is the hardest to sympathize or humanize with of those characters, right? R2 for some reason works perfectly as far as a connection piece, whereas 3PO doesn't because of his nature, I suppose. I like 3PO too. I think 3PO is an amazing character. But yeah, I think it's easier to kind of connect, strangely enough, with faceless R2D2. So, yeah.
But I just thought that was interesting, the trajectory of the slapstick in the movies.
The fight at the end, the saber battle that has ruined every saber battle since. Because no saber battle is the battle on Mustafar. It's not as good, it's not as crisp, it's not as thing. And I think the secret is, even later in life, these were two actors that had been using lightsabers for how many years straight, who played with them off screen, who they became second nature to them. So when it became time to choreograph and film this thing, you had probably two of the best people in the world who could act doing it. And it is, I still think, some of the best combat on screen, one-on-one. It is so good. Even like the CGI force jumps and everything, it all fits. It all feels comfortable even to this day. Like, it is engaging in a way that is pure storytelling, because you take the words out and you watch it without the words, even the sound, it's still impressive. So yeah, like I was thinking about it, like they were probably the only two people at that point who could do this, and there've probably been nobody since, because they just haven't had the practice and haven't lived in that world as long as those two had it. That
I think as well, and this is where I'll draw on my knowledge of the behind the scenes for Revenge of the Sith. I really think that both those actors wanted that fight to be super special, and they wanted it to be the absolute best that it could possibly be. And I think they both felt that that was their moment to actually
it was their
do
crescendo.
Something. It was the crescendo, and they knew it and they put everything into it. By all accounts, every moment that they had on set where they were not filming, they were practicing that fight, and they were getting faster and they were getting better, and they were trying to make sure that that choreography was absolutely on point. And I think as well, Nick Gillard had this is now his third movie. This is his third movie as fight choreographer to put all of this together. And he was obviously able to draw on everything that he'd learnt so far and put together this insane sword fight. So, or lightsaber duel, if you like, rather than sword fight. But I agree with you. I think it's spectacular. So it's also interesting that after 3 movies of incredibly heavy CGI and compositing, by the time you get to the third one, you do stop noticing it as much as when you watch it in the earlier 2. So while it's all the same stuff. Yes, characters are sometimes not integrated very well into their backgrounds. Yes, there is an awful lot of CGI in this film, particularly with digital doubles of characters and things like that.
Yeah.
It's just, you don't care as much by the time you're at the third one in the trilogy. You know that that's what they're doing in these movies, and you kind of look past it. So it's funny though, because if you watch Revenge of the Sith on its own after having a big break from the prequels, it all comes back and it all comes back and hits you in the face again. But if you're watching it as number 3 in a chain, as we recently have, then it definitely doesn't feel it. You don't feel it as much.
You brought up something that I just want to quickly go back to, and that was the speed of that fight. And I think that's the thing that people are yearning for every time they see lightsabers now, is the speed. Because they're like, why can't it be like that? Why can't it be like that? I'm like, well, outside of the lore, LORE, it can't be like that because you don't have any two people who've had that much time. to practice it and rehearse it and live in it. And, like they talk about the transition to the Vader Obi-Wan fight in A New Hope. And they're like, well, these are two Force masters at this point. They're battling more with the Force, and Obi-Wan has a different goal, and that's why it's slow and measured and controlled. And then you get the Luke Vader fights later on, and it's all about, well, you've got Vader, who is no longer at the peak, and you've got Luke, who is learning, so you get a slower fight. So there are these justifications. But yeah, what people are missing is the speed. And it is special. Even if it is a bit of them just standing in front of them and waving their lightsabers like this, like a glow stick for about 10 seconds. Silliest part of that fight.
That is one of my favorite parts of that fight. I know it would be. Because it's something where if you think about it, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if you look at it in terms of just a moment, and obviously the idea, fun. It's visually fun. And the idea behind that moment is that they know each other so well that they're actually able to predict in a way where the other is going. It all gets, you can't think about it too hard, but it is a cool, couple of seconds of that fight. And it's one that I think of often when I look at that fight and I reflect upon it going, that is just a cool moment. So, because it's also, you're thinking about the Force and you're thinking about them using that and getting her. Anyway, it's a thing. It's a thing, guys. If you watch the movie and didn't see that moment, it's a thing. It's a thing. There'll be a YouTube short on it somewhere.
So I've got one more thing I want to say about this, and I'm happy to leave that later. Do you have anything else you want to bring up about the film?
Well, it depends what you're going to say. I don't know.
My thing is a little frivolous, so I was going to give you a chance to say something more serious.
Mm-hmm. Now, hit me with the frivolity.
How does she not know she's having twins? How? I know it's a long time ago in a galaxy far away. They're in the future. They have medicine. They have droids that go, ooh-bah.
Okay, if you're going to talk something frivolous, then we do need to talk a little bit about the childbirth sequence, because there's a couple of look.
We're losing her. We don't know why. Science.
That whole scene is just like, what? And she's obviously like in great pain as she delivers the two babies, and I'm like, we're in this insane technologically advanced. I mean, I'm sorry, no one has an epidural. Like no one's
you're missing the most obvious. Yoda could have just gone and just taken switched her brain off and let her just have birth, no pain. The Force is there.
And also, it is a serious moment, and the Uber droid is a thing of beauty by itself, and that was something where I remember being in the cinemas going, oh, that's a choice. Not one not one that I think perhaps we should keep, but Uber.
The other thing I want to mention, right? We've gone through 3 movies now, and we've had Obi-Wan Kenobi, Mace Windu, Yoda, Padme Amidala. We have these space names, these fantastical names. First baby comes out. That's Luke. Second baby comes out. Yeah, Leia. Simplest names in movies. Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, all these fantastic... Nah, it's Luke. Simple, Luke. Crazy to me that their name's Luke and Leia. I mean, obviously they have to be. That's what they were called. It's predestined. But it's crazy to me that she's just like, nah. And it's crazy to me she had 2 names ready. So anyway.
Yeah, because she wasn't sure she was having twins. So.
What? All throughout the movie, the baby, she references.
Yeah. Look, she does get, Padme, or Natalie Portman, if you like, does get kind of shortchanged again in this one. I'd say this one's probably even worse for her than in episode 2, where at least she has the action beats and the agency and that sort of thing as well. In this one, she's got the same dialogue. She's got to deliver. She's got to do the childbirthing stuff with the Uber droid at the end. I do think that this one would have been a hard one for her to actually have a go at. I get it. It's iconic now. Do you know what I mean? But it would have been tricky at the time.
Her moments on Mustafar are pretty great. As far as you're breaking my heart. I mean, that is not a great piece of dialogue, but it lands with her acting and her tearing up and things like that, the throwing together.
It's kind of amazing that she's able to actually make any of that land at all, because it is very difficult to deliver.
Yeah, it's a great performance on her with very little to do. I've just thought of it now. The last thing I want to think about is the decision to put Luke on Tatooine with his actual family in a way. Like, obviously he doesn't know there's twins. Obviously he doesn't know they survived or anything like that. So, there's a big advantage there. But the idea that he put that kid on Tatooine, and the idea that Yoda's only answer to "I just lost a fight" is "gotta go into exile." Like, it's just, they're very kind of blunt answers to those questions. You could have just done Yoda going, "Hey man, I'm going to have to travel the galaxy and figure something out." He just happens to be on Dagobah and Empire Strikes Back. But yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's very neat, isn't it? Because everyone's got to get where they end up at the next time that they're introduced into the story. So, and it's something where you think if Revenge of the Sith was 2 movies instead of 1,
You
then
could have got that, yeah.
we could have got there. So in a way, I know it would break the symmetry of the thing, but I kind of yearn for episode 1, episode 2, and then Revenge of the Sith, and then actually a 4th part to the prequels. So it's a prequel quadrilogy rather than a prequel trilogy, and almost seeing, I guess, a break somewhere in the middle of our actual Revenge of the Sith here to give everything a little bit more time. Maybe Anakin's actual turn to the dark side, but he's not in the suit yet, happens at the end of the 3rd movie, and then by the end of the 4th movie, he's in the suit as the Vader we all know and fear. So I don't know. I'm doing fan rewrites now. I'd say we should wrap this up.
So I want to finish with, I'm really glad we watched these 3 movies back to back. I think it's probably the only way I could have done them. Because if we had kind of done episode 1 and then episode 3 and then we'd waited on Clone Wars or whatever like that, it would have been a bit tougher. But no, I've really enjoyed the watch. Thank you very much, Jim, for kind of coming on this journey with me for these 3 movies. We've criticized them. I've ripped the 2nd movie to shreds, but I still love them. I still love Star Wars, and I'll watch them again and again and again. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I think that ultimately we were actually pretty fair. I think we both talked about a lot of things we loved in all 3 of those movies. So, and I had a great time watching them as well. So before I find out what we are watching next week, could you tell the good people of the interwebs where they can find our wonderful podcast? If it is wonderful, I don't know. It's a podcast, so,
Hey, it's wonderful. Don't you dare think our podcast is anything other. But I said it at the top of the podcast. Our podcast name is Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. Type those words in and you'll find us in those 3 places. You'll find our back catalogue where we look at 12 Angry Men and we look at, dinosaurs. We look at all the greatest parts of movies. Go have a look. See if there's your favorite movie that we've already looked at. And if we haven't looked at it, leave a comment on this movie. Tell us what movie we need to go watch next. And you never know. We might agree with you and we might go watch that movie. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so at Jim_and_Ben on Instagram or Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures on TikTok. All right, Jim. I don't know if you're ready for this pick. This is a pick that is full of chaos. It is full of madness. It is a complex situation of a film. It is the 2nd film of a trilogy. I break my own pattern of we should watch films in order because that's what order is about. But this movie is so about chaos that it needs to be watched before its brethren. I'm going to ask why you're so serious. I'm going to ask you, do you know how I got these scars? Because we are watching Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight.
I'm here for it. I am always up for The Dark Knight. So let's do it. I can't wait. I'm surprised you picked that. That would have been a me pick any other day of the
I was
week.
feeling I haven't seen The Dark Knight in maybe, I don't know, 5 years? It's been a while since I've seen it, so I felt it was time.
All right. Well, I'm happy to go on this journey with you. So,
one last time, guys, #justice for Yub-Nub. This has been Star Wars and
by the way,
Ben's Movie Adventures.
He had a shirt made. He had a shirt made that literally says "Justice for Yub-Nub." If you haven't watched our Return of the Jedi,
it's going to show up on future podcasts, guys.
Ridiculous. Anyway, it's just for you. It's not like you had shirts made.
No.
You just had one made.
My shirt, and it says hashtag justice for Yup Nub. Don't worry, guys. You'll see it.
I love that exists. Wear that next time, particularly for a non-Star Wars movie, just to confuse everybody.
I deliberately didn't wear it in this movie because I didn't want to detract from Star Wars. The message needs to be given out in non-Star Wars situations.
Right. All right. Well, look forward to it. See you later, everybody.
Bye.